FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. The date is March 7th, 2016, and gold, it broke that magical 1,263 per ounce mark. Magical only because that's the top of a channel that's been forming over the years. And then it got knocked down on Friday. And today, Monday, it's up a minor $7 advance, but it's been as high as $10, $11. And it's gone up to around $12.73. It's going up, and now silver appears to be joining the fun. Well, right now it's only up 7 cents the ounce. It was up 30 something before, but you know how these things work. I mean, as we're speaking, it's all over the place, which is a big change from what's been happening over the past 4 years. Sure, upside reversals, see that multiple times per day sometimes. That's where the price is heading down. It's negative for the day, and then it jumps up and turns positive. Hadn't seen that for years, but it's happening now, which makes me cautiously, guardedly optimistic. And the person you're about to hear from, he's also guardedly optimistic, talking about John Rubino of dollarcollapse.com. John, happy Monday.
Happy Monday, Kerry.
Hey, so you've been, I don't know, you work on weekends because I see your articles coming out constantly through the weekend, and lots going on right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all about the central banks now, once again, because you got China, whose economy is slowing down, coming out and saying that they're going to ease in the near term. They're also going to run bigger government deficits and cut taxes and do the fiscal side of it too. But they're promising aggressive easing, and they have a 6% per year growth target now that they're going to try to hit without worrying about things like increasing debt and increasing money supply. They're just going to go for growth. And then the European Central Bank meets this month, and everybody expects Mario Draghi to come out with a new stepped up quantitative easing program, because European inflation is now negative. In other words, it's back in deflation, which is terrifying to an over-indebted system. You know, Europe is already a mess, but let deflation increase the real size of European debts, and the European banking system will just implode. They know it. So the European Central Bank is widely expected to ease aggressively going forward. And then you got the Fed on the other side of this now, where there's a dynamic in the U.S. Where the Fed either announces that it intends to raise rates or actually does raise rates like it did last month, and then the financial markets just tank. And then the fact that the financial markets are tanking leads everybody to believe that the Fed is done raising interest rates, and then stocks go back up, which leads everybody to believe that the Fed is going to raise interest rates at the next meeting. And that meeting is coming up shortly, and now there's a consensus forming that we might have higher interest rates in the U.S. after all, which would make the Fed the outlier among the world's central banks. Everybody else is cutting interest rates, and if the Fed raises interest rates, other things being equal, that makes the dollar stronger than it would be, and exacerbates the problems with the U.S. economy that flow from a too strong currency. So that's liable to make stocks go back down again, which will spook everybody. You know, this dynamic can go on for a really long time, with the market just being extremely choppy until the Fed chooses one side or the other. Are they going to continue to tighten from here on out, no matter what, or will they start cutting in response to a really weak global economy? And who knows? I don't think anybody really knows, because I don't think the central banks actually know what they're doing. They're kind of responding to events without a real plan in hand anymore. You know, there's no guiding theory or among the world's monetary authorities. They're just trying to get through the next month, or the next election cycle, or the next earnings cycle for corporations. They don't really know what they're doing beyond that. And that is leading to greater uncertainty around the world. You know, you're seeing people start to respond to, for instance, negative interest rates in Japan and Europe by hoarding high denomination banknotes. In other words, money. People are starting to take actual cash and stick it in vaults. Vaults are selling out, home vaults in Japan, because people are they're accumulating yen and they got to have some place to put it, so they're buying vaults for it. So we're seeing a response now to people losing trust in the world's governments to actually manage the monetary system in a competent way. And if it's happening now, with interest rates just barely negative in some places and near zero in many places, what happens when interest rates go more negative, which they have to, for instance, in Europe, where they're in deflation now, as I said, and the only possible response from a mainstream monetary theory point of view is even lower interest rates, then we'll see this process of people losing trust in the monetary authorities accelerate. And that's when things run the risk of spinning out of control, because if people just don't want to hold their money in banks anymore because they have to pay rather than earn on a negative rate bank account, you'll see people just start hoarding cash and sucking their money out of the banking system. And as that spreads around the world, that's destabilizing. So the next step will be governments, which you're seeing now, actively trying to discourage people from holding cash, either by regulating it in some way that makes it unattractive or flat out making it illegal. We've got real economists now saying, hey, let's do away with the $100 bill.
Yeah.
the 500 euro bill.
Summers wants to get rid of the $100 bill. Because it's only drug dealers who use $100 bills anyway. You and I know that, right? Sure thing.
Well,
what a bunch of garbage.
What's interesting now is that it's turning into everybody. So they're if they decide to try to do away with high denomination banknotes, then in effect that turns a lot of regular people into criminals. People who don't want to give up those banknotes because they don't have any place else to put their free cash. And so what will happen is if the war on cash really gains momentum and we actually do start eliminating these high denomination bills, and then maybe all bills like some economists would like to see, then we'll see black markets spring up that use other things as money. And I think silver coins will be one of the big beneficiaries of that, because
ammunition would be great for that.
Yeah, we'll be trading bullets and silver coins.
The 9mm standard. I've been saying it for years. We will be on the 9mm standard if these idiots have their way. Hey, John, like the justification for raising interest rates, is that the economy is doing so well that the jobless rate is declining. And that is the most bogus number on the planet. I mean, you saw it last week. It's all bartenders and wait staff. And what are they trying to pull over our eyes here? I mean, they're just conning us here. That's
a funny dynamic, too, because the government comes out every month and reports a really favorable headline number for unemployment. And everybody gets all excited and thinks, oh, the economy's back to full employment. We're growing again and it's normal times. And then over the next week, the analysis comes in of the jobs report. And it's all really horrible. This time around, there was a total increase in jobs, but the increase in part-time jobs was greater than the increase in overall jobs, meaning that we lost full-time jobs and we added part-time jobs. Like you said, bartenders and waiters and other people in service industries who probably don't want those jobs. They probably have careers in other fields where they can't get hired. So they're taking these things as an interim step and hoping to get a real job somewhere in the future. And for a lot of people, it's just not happening, and the longer you're out of your chosen career, the less attractive you are as a hire, and the harder it is to get that good job again, the one that you had 3 years ago before you got laid off. And so we're, in a sense, obsoleting a lot of our people and making them less and less productive because they're falling behind on their careers because they're out of their careers for such a long time while they're tending bar or working as a temp in a corporation or whatever.
It's really a bad situation. And if you, if you really are desperate enough that you have to pretty much take whatever is out there, you're underemployed under the traditional definition of employment, right?
Yeah. We've got an awful lot of people out there who are working 2 part-time jobs, which shows up in the government statistics as 2 new jobs being created. What it really is somebody who can't find a real job and they're working at a couple of crappy jobs and trying to cobble together the hours and the pay to make ends meet. And in a lot of cases, it's getting harder and harder, which is why corporate earnings are now decreasing. and retail sales aren't growing. People can't buy stuff if they're barely making ends meet. They're not eating in restaurants like they used to, and pretty soon they won't be buying cars, because I think we've already lent all the money that we can lend to people with bad credit to buy cars. Who else is left after the last 3 or 4 years of surging subprime auto lending, and that's kind of the way it is across the economy. So in a real sense, in other words, looking at the underlying numbers that make up these favorable headline numbers, things are actually getting worse and worse. If corporate profits are going down and the number of full-time jobs is dropping, then you've got an economy that's in decline. And it's kind of hidden by these headline numbers in the U.S. But if you look at the rest of the world, the numbers are a lot more consistent with the bear case for the global economy. Japan's not growing anymore, and there's no demographic reason why they should grow in the future. They're just borrowing huge amounts of money to maintain the status quo and digging themselves more and more deeply into debt without anything to show for it. Europe, as I said, is now dropping back into deflation after 3 years of Mario Draghi's whatever it takes QE programs. They've increased the ECB's balance sheet dramatically by buying lots of bonds. They're actually running out of bonds to buy. And yet they're going to do something new here pretty soon, and it's not going to work either. If you do something 11 times in a row and you don't get the result you're hoping for, the 12th time is probably not going to change things. And that's the situation that the ECB is in right now. So the US is able to hide the fact that we're kind of in the same boat by reporting fictitious headline numbers, but you can't hide that reality forever. And sometime, probably in 2016, people are going to figure out that that's the case in the U.S. too. And, that's a big part of the reason that this presidential election is so unusual. As Carrie, you and I have talked about a few times on our calls.
Oh, yeah.
People are voting in ways, and groups of people are voting in patterns that are kind of unprecedented. And the reason for that is that they don't see the current system as working for them. This 4.9% unemployment rate or whatever it is right now is not translating into a good life with extra money coming in to allow all the bills to be covered for most people. And they recognize that. They don't understand the reasons for it necessarily, but they see that their lives are going in the wrong direction. And so they're more than usually willing to vote for people who promise basically just to burn the thing down and start over.
Like Bernie.
And yeah, feel the burn.
Yeah, feel the burn on your tax bill. I mean, the guy is a lunatic. I have a problem separating him in my mind from Larry David. I don't know who's real. I don't know who is satire. And that I find quite distressing, because it's like, oh, look, it's Larry. No, that's Bernie Sanders. Wait a second. Got that wrong. It's really, it's just through the looking glass.
Yeah, but it's completely consistent with the world as it's evolving. You see people who, Bernie Sanders is an honest guy. I don't want to impugn his character. I think he says what he thinks, and he doesn't tailor his message to the audience, which is admirable. But his views are what would have seemed way out of the mainstream in most other elections. And yet, the guy's generating massive crowds and a surprising number of votes, because there's a big part of the electorate who at this point really doesn't care whether the current system survives or not, because they don't see the current system as working for them. And that's on the Republican side, that's why Donald Trump is winning, because whether he's really an insider or an outsider, he's portraying himself as an outsider who's willing to change the status quo in fundamental ways. And so people are responding to that too.
Yes.
You got two different groups of people with different concerns, but the central aspect of their voting pattern now is that they're willing to throw it all up in the air and see if we can change things for the better by doing that, because it's not working for them right now. And you see that around the world, people are buying gold and silver again, which is a sign of a loss of faith in the monetary system. In Europe, you've got parties, formerly fringe parties of the right and the left, winning elections, or at least seriously contesting elections.
Yeah, being credible, presenting.
Yeah,
credible
all of a sudden, National Front in France is the biggest single vote getter among the major political parties. And Portugal just put or a far left government in place. Spain can't figure out how to put a government in place because they've got these newly emerged parties who don't want to play the old game and aren't willing to form a coalition on terms that makes the European Union happy. So as far as I know right now, Spain doesn't even have a government.
Yeah.
And Greece, there was just an article today in Bloomberg or someplace saying that Brexit is back on the table. Greece is spinning out of control and might actually leave the Eurozone after all, after 3 or 4 years of contentious negotiations and 50% youth unemployment for all that time. So they might be back in front page news here pretty soon. So nothing has been fixed.
And there's Brexit too. Don't forget the Brexit. So.
Yeah, Britain, that's right. In another couple of months, Britain is going to vote in a referendum to leave the European Union. And right now it's like 51% stay, 49% leave in polling. So it's very close. And so it's completely conceivable that the British electorate votes to leave the European Union, which would be an earthquake because they're not part of the Eurozone, but they are really deeply entwined with continental Europe. In regulatory ways and immigration policy and to an extent the tax code. And so to pull themselves out would be a logistical nightmare that would reverberate throughout Europe. But a lot of Britons are starting to see that as the better alternative to staying in the European Union. And so, when this is going on all around the world, the average person finds it easier and easier to look around and say, wow, this is a mess. The world is in chaos and it's not going to get any better for me anytime soon, and act accordingly. So that's why you got people hoarding cash and buying precious metals again,
and safes, and guns. I mean, gun sales through the roof.
Yeah, gun sales are through the roof. Get this, in Germany now, which is really unusual historically, recent history at least. In Germany.
Really? I didn't know you could buy them in Germany.
You got to jump through some serious hoops to buy guns in Germany. But the whole thing on New Year's Eve, when there were all those sexual assaults on the part of roving groups of immigrant men. And so now German gun sales are way up. Of course, in American terms, it's still a trickle, but for Germany, it's a huge jump. And in the U.S., of course, gun sales are way up. And the makeup of the guns that we're buying has changed dramatically since 2014. It used to be we mostly bought rifles because we were a country of hunters. Now it's handguns. Sales are dwarfing rifle sales because we're thinking in terms of up close and personal action with our guns now. Not 100 yards to hit a deer. We're thinking 5 feet on the street or something like that with the guns that we're buying. So that's a big change in psychology.
The other thing with that is that more women buying guns than ever before.
Yes.
Anecdotal evidence, granted, but my friends down in Florida here tell me when they go to the permit classes, because Florida has a shall issue permit, meaning you just apply for it. If your background's clean, all that, you got it. Basically, it's all women who are applying for these things now. Pretty amazing. So no surprises there, but stay tuned because things are really in flux. If you don't think they're in flux, just watch the fluctuation in precious metals minute by minute, day by day. Not that I spend my time doing that because it's pointless, but you see that this market is behaving completely different than it was just a few short months ago. Anyway, go to John's site, dollarcollapse.com. You'll always find the link to his site on our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. And John, we will talk to you next week.
Great, Kerry. Thanks. Talk to you next week.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.